what is the number one thing that you would want people to remember if they're thinking about Social Security?
When it comes to retirement, it's not always about how much money you have. It's the income that you live on, not the asset.
Do we see a lot of people collecting at 62, 63?
I would say a good majority of people take it. Welcome back to another edition of Retire and Thrive, where we help you live your life with purpose, wealth, and confidence.
Yes. Thanks so much for joining us. This is episode 18 for us, which is an accomplishment for us.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It's been so fun to help you along your way with your finances and your retirement. And if you're younger, just educating you on a few things maybe you didn't know about. I'm Kamie. This is Dan. And fall is upon us. We are excited about that. Perfect time to golf. Fall. Courses are in pristine shape. I love it. Have you been playing, or you just been traveling the world?
I have been traveling a lot. I don't want to sound like that's a bad thing, but
no, that's a good
probably
thing.
half work, half pleasure.
Yeah.
Weddings to go to. I've got
that's great.
Nieces getting married.
Fall weddings are fun.
Fall weddings are very, very fun. Mm-hmm. And I look at you. You are very festive, I will say, today with the orange. I love it. Yeah, it looks great.
Yes, it's that time of year. Fall. Yeah. Winter is just around the corner.
I know. It's now all the leaves are falling, and I said this a couple weeks ago that I love fall. Absolutely love it. It's beautiful. I know you get a little frustrated with your golf game because you can't find your golf balls under the leaves.
Are they're pesky, but that's okay.
Yeah. It either seems like a lot of our conversations outside of the finances center around golf or the Twins.
Yeah, or baseball. We're based out of Minnesota, so if you're joining us from anywhere else, thank you so much for checking in and joining us. Yes, we're in Minnesota, but we love everyone all over because all this information can help you no matter where you are. And we've been touching on Social Security. If you've been hanging along with us, the last two episodes have really been focused heavily on Social Security when you reach that retirement age. We've touched about along the way, reaching that retirement age, some different things, helping people if they're younger and still accumulating and putting money into your Social Security. But let's touch on Social Security one final time here, Dan. What is the number one thing that you would want people to remember if they're thinking about Social Security and what they've taken away from everything we've discussed?
Yeah, you're right. This is our third episode specifically around Social Security.
A lot. We've talked a lot about it, but it's so important.
Yeah, it is very, very important. And I think, as I've shared with you on the first episode, which was episode 16, first episode as it pertains to Social Security, it is the number one question we get asked. And I think rightfully so, because it is very critical, which, again, I think I want to just touch on here in just a minute. It is very critical on making that decision, but it's also overwhelming. It's very complicated. It's not just one size fits all. So you asked me the question, what's the number one takeaway? It's a big decision, and you should go into it knowing that and take your time and do the math and analyze. And one size definitely does not fit all.
Right.
And so if you're talking to someone at the Social Security Administration, not saying they aren't familiar with Social Security, but they're not familiar with your situation. Sure. In other words, they don't know what your incomes of other sources are. They don't know necessarily what your spouse's income. They don't know if your intention is to leave your kids money or if it's not to leave your kids money. And those are all things that factor into Social Security. And so your question is, what's one thing, what's one advice? Just take it serious.
Yeah. And knowing that age that you would like to start collecting that Social Security is important. You might not know these percentages off the top of your head. I'm sure you don't. But do we see a lot of people collecting at 62, 63?
Yeah, you're right. I don't know the percentages, but if I go on based on people that have come to us without an analysis, maybe they come to us and they're already retired or they might be 70 or whatever it is, I would say a good majority of people take it early.
They do.
And, I want to say one thing. This is kind of going off track here a little bit, but we have spent the last two episodes, and I say we, I really mean me, talking and centering around specifically when should you take Social Security, because don't mess it up. It's irrevocable. You can't change it. But here's something I want to just say is if we see a good majority of people take it right away at 62, and then they come to us and they're 65 or 66 and they say, did I really mess it up? Remember when we talked on that first episode on 16 that I said, your break-even typically is somewhere between 81 and 83. The one thing I haven't mentioned, and I say this all the time to people when they're trying to make this decision, is we can do the full-on analysis. But at the end of the day, your lifestyle at 62 is a lot different than it is at 81 and 82. So for some people, it's like, there's a scare factor. I mean, we talked about that I want to get it before it's gone. And I kind of demystified that probably is not an issue you should be worried about. But there's also the other factor that when you're 62, two things. One is your health and vitality to enjoy it is a lot greater at 62 than it would be at 82.
Right.
And then the other factor is, for some people, they take it early, Kamie, because they just don't know what their future holds. I mean, they don't know either their longevity or life expectancy, or just as important, they don't know what their health is going to be. I mean, we always say to people when we do this full-on analysis and we get into cash flow and projections and all of this stuff, we get into that. And I always tell people our number one goal that we try to do with every client that's approaching retirement is to run the deepest analysis to project all kinds of scenarios so we do everything we can so you don't run out of money. And people are usually like, yep, I get it. I mean, that's what we're here for. We want to make sure we don't run out of money. And obviously there's a lot of factors that go into there and there's assumptions. But I always tell people our number two goal, right behind, a very close second, is to do the things that you want to do while you're still healthy enough to do them.
Right.
And that matters.
Do some people come in with the mentality, say at age 62, of get it or could potentially lose it? And is that an accurate statement? Get my Social Security now, or I'm at risk of losing it.
And what do you mean by losing it?
Losing it if perhaps an unfortunate incident occurs and you pass away.
Oh, yeah. So due to health conditions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm not a medical expert, so I'm not going to really even comment too much on this. But one of the things that I hear often is, my dad passed away when he was 70, and I had an uncle that passed away at 72. And the research I've done or the papers I've read is that 2/3 of your life expectancy is based on lifestyle, not genetics. Sure. So again, I'm not publicly stating that genetics don't matter, but I am saying, you know what, if your lifestyle was healthy, your probability of living longer is probably going to move the needle more than saying, I had family members that lasted until 105 or whatever.
Sure. As we wrap up our discussion on Social Security, anything in particular that sticks out that we haven't touched on that you really want to kind of pound in, make sure people remember?
There's a lot of things that we have touched on, and I want to continue to reiterate some of the more important things.
Sure.
I would say the number one thing is factor in, if you are married, what your spouse's Social Security is relative to what your Social Security is, because that's a big deal. The other thing that we factor in when we're running the numbers is we look at all sources of income. And then we look at the potential, we talked about it last episode, the taxability of that Social Security. So if people are in a position to start drawing down maybe some of their retirement assets and holding off on their Social Security and taking that guaranteed 7% increase every year, or even if they wait until after full retirement until age 70 and getting an 8% increase, that oftentimes can make a big, big difference in their retirement plan. Yeah. And that's where I had mentioned early on that some of the viewers might say, well, what does it have to do with me leaving money to my kids? Because I thought you said Social Security, you wouldn't leave money to your kids. Well, if the strategy is to draw down your portfolio and delay Social Security, that will have an impact on leaving money to the next generation. As opposed to taking Social Security earlier, not touching your 401k or 403b or IRA, and then having that continue to grow and leaving that as somewhat of a legacy.
Okay.
So that does factor into it. And again, I feel like we've talked on like tons and tons of different scenarios. And I think the biggest message I would convey is it is complicated. And it's easy to look back once you've made that decision and say, we should have done this, or maybe it doesn't matter. Once you've made the decision, now you can only look forward. For me, with Social Security, I look at it as an income replacement. So what I mean by that is I'm going to just take a basic scenario. So let's just say, and I like to use this number because it's easy in my head, but if you got $1 million portfolio, we talked several episodes ago about something called a sustainable withdrawal rate. We were talking about this in the cash flow episode. So a sustainable withdrawal rate is how much can I pull out of my portfolio and never run out of money, or historically wouldn't have run out of money. And there's been a lot of different studies, 4.5%, 4%, whatever that number is. So if I use that scenario of a 4% withdrawal rate, and I've got $1 million portfolio, that's $40,000 a year I'm pulling out of my portfolio. And the research that's been done is in that 4 to 4.5%, that also factors in a 3% increase for inflation every year. So now we talk about Social Security. If I'm getting $3,000, $3,200 per month in Social Security, guess what? That's $1 million 401k or IRA that I don't have to have because I'm getting that consistent income.
Right.
So in other words, sometimes we get people that come into us and they feel like, you know what, I really didn't do a great job at saving. I'm really struggling. I'm afraid we're not going to live the dream. And we start doing the math and it's like, no, you guys were high income. And I'm not here to judge you and say you should have put more money in your retirement or shouldn't have. But between you and your spouse, you guys have over $5,000 a year coming in consistently. And if you do the math, if you've got $5,000 a month, that's $60,000 a year. And again, kind of backing into that 4%, that would be $1.2 million or $1,250,000 at 4%, generating the same $60,000 a year. So in other words, if between spouses you've got $5,000 a month coming in, that's $1.2 million. You don't have to have in a 401k to generate that income. So when it comes to retirement, it's not always, and we often think of this, it's not always about how much money you have. And we touched on this in the cash flow section. It's the income that you live on, not the asset. And Social Security is a repeatable, consistent income that hits your bank account every single month as long as you're alive.
Yeah, and this might be a simpleton question, but is that your only option, monthly payments? There's no lump sum option when it comes to Social Security?
No, it is monthly, and that isn't necessarily a simple question because sometimes that is confusing, for example, with pensions.
Right.
They can take a lump sum or they can take monthly income.
Right, this is different.
This is totally different. This is monthly income.
And it's one payment a month?
One payment a month, yep.
Okay, with Social Security. We've discussed so many topics, as Dan mentioned. He's my myth buster over here. Is there any myth that you really want to reiterate that we busted throughout this conversation, or at least we hope that we have for folks at home?
Yeah, I think one myth that I touched on before, and I'll just touch on again, that I'm going to grab it as soon as I can because it's going to go away. A lot of debate on, the funding of Social Security and will it be around. I touched last time and said, every time in 35 years that I've seen major changes, and it may be in tax rates or, we have a lot of discussions on Roth and can they ever go back and grab it and make me pay tax twice on it. Every experience I've been involved in, it's always grandfathered in. So I think one of probably the biggest myths, and when I say myths and I say biggest myth, it's what I'm asked the most.
Oh, yeah. I think
will
that's
it be
around? Number one response when there's folks talking about Social Security who maybe aren't fully educated on it. That's typically the conversation. And
you may not believe this, but there was a time in my life when I was similar in age to you.
I believe that.
It was a long time ago. But I remember doing numbers. We didn't have the sophisticated technology that we have today, but I remember doing numbers for people that were in their early 60s, and we were doing Social Securities, and it was more of just kind of a calculator and writing stuff down on paper. And I said to them, they're like, well, do you think there's any concerns with Social Security? So again, we're going back to the 2000s now, and my response was no, as long as, but for me, this is back, 20-some years ago, I used to say, for me, I don't know if it'll be around. And so, again, for the younger audience, I can't necessarily say with absolute certainty, but there is some uncertainty for the younger generation of what their Social Security will look like. Mm-hmm. Let me finish because I don't want you to get excited on me saying, I'm paying in 6.2% and I'm going to get nothing. What I have seen happen over the years is they make it less attractive. In other words, we talked initially about Social Security when it first started, the monthly payments in 1940. the employer was putting in, or excuse me, the employee was putting in 2%. Now we're putting in 6.2%. It used to never be taxable. Now up to 85% of it is taxable. So, you've got a long way before you're eligible for Social Security. And what I've witnessed, and again, this is a very broad statement as it pertains to the government, is when they take something away, they typically give you something on the other end. So it might be, when you go to take Social Security, it might be it's all taxable, and oh, by the way, you're not in the 22% tax bracket anymore. Tax rates have gone up, and now you're in the 44% tax bracket. Sure. So I think at this point, there's no reason to have a deep discussion about what Social Security may look like in 20 years or 30 years. All I can tell you is it will probably look a lot different. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like in the political arena, when we've had administrations try to mess with Social Security, it's usually a losing battle because the lobbyists and you're representing such a large demographic of people that it's just something that generally doesn't get messed with too much.
Sure. All right. Anything else that you'd like to touch on?
I think we've wrapped up a lot of information on the Social Security.
I've learned a lot.
And I think we're going to move on next week. We're going to talk a little bit on taxes.
Okay.
But you've been very patient.
You've
been very patient these last 3 episodes because, honestly, I look at you and I think about, this is a topic that, it's hard enough to talk about retirement when you're in your 30s, let alone Social Security. That's going to,
Hey, man, it's in my paycheck. I appreciate everything that you've taught us, though. You see that in your paycheck every month. It's like, or every 2 weeks, whatever. And it's like, okay, where is this going? When am I going to get it? How can I make sure that there aren't any mistakes?
Right.
And you can check that. You can double check to make sure there weren't any mistakes with your Social Security and then learning more about, okay, when do I get it? Yeah. When should I take it? I think it's interesting.
And I think this is, again, we're on episode 18 here, which time has just flown.
Yeah.
And I think about us, and I think it works well with us because you are very inquisitive and you do want to know things. And this has worked well for me too.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, well, this is probably a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I don't know. I think a lot of people probably have those questions because not everyone is that educated when it comes to their finances.
Yeah. But great questions, and I do enjoy this because I think obviously we're at different stages in our life. Yeah. But you come at things with a perspective of I'm younger, but I'm curious, and so you ask questions that I think are relevant because 75% of our clients are either retired or within a year or two of retirement. So that's kind of where my mindset usually goes, is how do we distribute some of this? And then you come at it from a different perspective of, I'm younger, I've got a lot of friends, we've got questions, what makes sense? So I think it's worked well that way, Kamie.
It's been great. It's been great. Okay, we're touching on taxes next week. Oh my goodness. Looking forward to that. I'm sure it's going to be a lot, but we will get through it and we will simplify it as much as we can for you. Thanks so much for following along with us. We drop a new podcast every week and you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again. Hope you have a great week.
Fortress Financial Group LLC is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Fortress and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt for licensure. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All indexes are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal.